Hello, good morning, afternoon, whatever. Since we're still in lockdown, social distancing, for the demo for May, I decided instead of trying to do something live, I'm going to do a little video of it. Hopefully you'll get something out of this. I don't know, we'll see how it goes. But what I'm talking about today is designing and turning segmented bowls. A lot of you have seen pictures of this already. This is one I just finished just about a week ago. This is all out of cherry and walnut. But before I turn that, it looks like this. Okay? To get to this point, we'll start. I started making these bowls many years ago. First ones I did, I just cut them on my table saw, cut the pieces on my table saw. They weren't real accurate cuts, so that's when I came up with making a cutting sled. This is a cutting sled that I use for cutting pieces for this. It's set at 15 degrees. It's as accurate as I could get it. I've also got one that's set for 7.5 degrees, which is 24 segments in a ring instead of 12 segments in a ring. 24 segments in a ring is a lot of pieces to worry about. But I strongly encourage you, if you are going to do segmented turning, make some kind of a cutting sled so you get accuracy. What I'm talking about in segments, depending upon how you cut them, you'll have these little trapezoidal shaped pieces, different sizes for different layers in your design. You want to cut these angles as accurately as you can. Once you get them cut, lightly sand them so you get the fuzzy edges off of them, glue them up together. And I'll show gluing here in a minute, but you glue two of them together and you end up with this. You glue a third piece onto it, you end up with something like that. And you glue two of these together and you end up with a half ring. This is an important point to stop. Think about it. When you get it to this point, you make your two half rings, try putting them together. You'll notice that their edges just don't quite meet. So you need to sand them a little bit. You get a nice perfect fit. And you get rings. Different diameter rings, very based on the length, how you cut these pieces. Then you stack your rings together, and notice you stack them so the joints do not overlap with each other, they're offset, and you can do many rings as you want. These rings were from a different project that I never did finish. I'll probably work on this in a couple of weeks. So to start with, let's go to the cutting diagram here. This is my cutting diagram design. I've done more than a dozen of this shaped bowls. There will be a picture of this included at the end. Close up this so you can see the numbers on it. But this is one I designed, I don't know, 6-7 years ago. And I've made more than a dozen bowls out of this design. And you notice there's two different shapes in here. The red is the one I use normally, but I also have done one with the black shape, and it's a little harder to turn, but I have done that out of the same pieces. So to start with, you figure out how long your segments need to be. You cut sticks. This is one for a decorative ring. You cut them on your sled, 15-degree angle on each end, makes a 30-degree included angle. This angle here is 30 degrees. 30 degrees into 360 is 12 segments to a ring. To glue these together, I use a piece of MDF so I keep everything nice and flat. I take two of the segments, a little glue on it. You don't need a lot. Put the segments together, rub them back and forth, put them in on your MDF, and you slide that joint back and forth, they will stick. Let them set. A couple hours, you'll end up with a piece like that. And then you can add a third piece onto it. To get 2 3s glued up, glue them together. This one needs another piece on it. Here, we'll make another half ring. Once you get your rings glued up, invariably there's going to be slight fluctuations in the thickness of the rings. You may not get those joints perfectly aligned. I've got a drum sander that I run these through, get them nice and flat. Clean off any of the glue squeeze out. These need to be sanded just a little bit more. I've got a couple in here that are still a little rough in spots. But then when you glue them together, you should see no daylight in between them. Glue them together. I then put another piece of MDF on top and a 10-pound weight on top of it and let them set. Another option for sanding these, cut a piece of MDF, diameter that'll fit on your lathe, mount on a faceplate, glue a piece of sandpaper to it. I would use 120 grit. Hold the ring up against that. That's another way of sanding if you don't have a drum sander. Remember, you got to sand both sides of them. After you get all your rings glued up, I glue a waste block on the bottom of it. This is what I'll attach my faceplate to. Before I attach the faceplate, I like to set it up with the faceplate on the lathe, set it up there. Faceplate's not attached to the bowl yet. Bring a tail stock up, push in the center, and then I can adjust it slightly up and down if need be to center it up as best as it can. Then when I start turning these, I like to use a carbide turning tool. You should start and you take off the points. So you get a nice smooth edge inside and out. Once you get the outside of it smoothed up, then you can figure out how you're going to do the inside. You still have plenty of thickness. You can see my top ring on this is about 1.25 inches thick, so there's plenty of wood there to make design changes. You can do this where it comes straight up, or you can do it where it flares out. But there's lots of options, lots of possibilities on making design changes. If you notice on this bowl, there's 2 design rings in here. They alternate cherry, walnut, and cherry. So you can see them. Actually, I think this one's got some butternut in it as well. But anyway, you can do design rings. These pieces that I have here are cherry and walnut glued up. It's going to be a bigger design ring, but notice this is 5/4 or 1.25 inches thick. So this is going to be a little bit thicker than the normal rings I've got in the rest of the bowl. All the rest of it are 3/4 inch thick. This is going to be 1.25 inches thick. Why turn segmented bowls? big advantage of turning segmented bowls, you can use dry stock, lumber, flat stock. It won't warp and shift like greenwood will. Plus, when you're turning this, you are turning side grain only. You're not turning in grain. Now with a traditional bowl, you've got in grain and then side grain. Well, this is all side grain, so you have very little chance for there to be any tear out. If you notice this, the bottom ring on here is 12 pieces. Try getting them to come to a point. Doing enough of these, I've learned that's not an easy thing to do. So you can see my solution that I came up with several years ago was to drill out the center of it and put a 1-inch dowel in the center. Other things that I've tried and I actually like better, this blank and this one were glued up several years ago when I was doing commission work. But instead of putting 12 segments into that bottom, do 4 segments so that you got 90-degree cuts, much easier to glue together. The problem with doing 12 segments for the base, you end up with pieces like this. These points in here are very thin, and when you get glue on them, they tend to want to warp. And so your center won't come to a nice, crisp point. After turning, finishing up the inside, a couple layers of polyurethane on it, I reverse it, mount this on a vacuum chuck, and I hollow a recess in the bottom of it to take some of the weight out of it. With this particular bowl, I had something happen which I've never had happen before. The day after I finished turning the bottom of it, I run my finger across the bottom in here, and there was a little lip right around that dowel. And what I figured happened is didn't get quite enough glue on that dowel, and as I turned back here, things shifted just slightly, and so it left a little gap around halfway around that dowel. And in order to fix it, I had to flood that area with thin CA, and then, because even trying to mount it on the vacuum chuck, there was enough of a gap in there that the vacuum chuck would not hold it. So I flooded that area with thin CA, remounted it, trued it up, turned it around, flooded the bottom of it with CA, and then trued the bottom up again. So that one had to have some work done on it. That's the only bowl that I've had that happen to. As I said, designing, like a cutting diagram, layout, design of your bowl on graph paper, with a center line, that way you can measure the length of each of your segments. So that's how you cut your sticks. Notice I've got 2 of them cut at different widths here. This is for the ring 2, which is 1 5/8 inches. This one's cut 1 1/4 inches for the top ring. You're cutting them on your cutting sled. You see this? What I do, cut this first edge off 15 degrees, turn it over, put it up against my guide stick here, which I've set for the length that I need to cut. Cut that one, turn it over, cut the next one, turn it over, cut the next one. You'll find that for each ring, you need between 3, I try to give myself an extra 3.5 feet. Top ring, you may need up to 4 feet of whatever stick you're going to use, whatever material you're going to use for that top ring. Okay, an audience here so they can ask questions. If anybody has questions about this, you can email me. That's the demo. Thank you.